Now we're going to get into animating, and animating in After Effects is quite simple once you understand how it works. For folks who are just coming in After Effects, it takes a little while to get used to the process, I suppose, or the technique. Animate, the word animate comes from Latin roots of just bringing something to life, giving life to something. And in After Effects, in order to give something life, you have to work with keyframes. And keyframes are basically recorded properties in time. And many things in After Effects can be recorded through this keyframing process. And right now we're just sticking with the basics. We're going to stick with the transform properties and show you how to animate those things over time. It's going to be super basic stuff, but it is the foundation for everything and anything else that can be animated inside After Effects, which, gosh, so many things can be animated. Effects and layer styles and text properties and paths and so on. We're going to start off really basic with position animation. And right now, if I look at my little square, I see that my position coordinates are at 436 by 243. That's the center of my composition. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my X value. I'm just going to slide this thing over so that my square is on the left side of my composition canvas. And what I need to do is I need to consider not just the coordinate of position, but also the time in which I want to have this movement executed. And I have a 10-second comp right now, and my playhead is currently at frame 0. How do I know this? I'm looking at my time code here, or I'm just looking at where my playhead is in the timeline. So I want to make sure that I'm at frame 0. A nice way to make sure that you are at frame 0 is to use the home button on your keyboard if your keyboard has a home button. My keyboard does not have a home button, but I know, just because I'm a lucky guesser, that I'm on a MacBook Pro. So if I hold down Function and hit my my right arrow key, it takes me to the end of my timeline, and if I use my Function button and press the left arrow key, it takes me to the beginning. Those are the equivalent of home and end on a normal full-scale keyboard, either for PC or Mac, doesn't matter. Anyways, I'm at frame 0, and what I want to do is I want to tell After Effects, all right, listen, at frame 0, I want you to record the coordinates for this square that I currently have located on the left side of the screen. And what I'm looking for is this little icon next to the word position, which is a stopwatch. They call it the time vary stopwatch. And if you just hover over it, it tells you toggle the ability of property to change over time. So basically what I'm doing is I'm initiating the animation process by clicking on the stopwatch. So if I click on the stopwatch, a couple things change. The stopwatch is now highlighted in a dark square. I have a few little buttons over here on the left edge. Most importantly, what I have is at frame 0 for that attribute of position in my timeline is this tiny little diamond, yellow little diamond, that is the keyframe for position that I just started. Now, by clicking on the stopwatch, that initiates keyframing process. It does not make a keyframe. Well, it does the first time you do it, but you only want to click on that thing once. I tell my students all the time, again and again, this phrase, only click on the stopwatch once. And then I always say, now class, how many times should you click on the stopwatch? And about half of them just get it right. So you can understand this is something you got to pay attention to. That stopwatch is either going to enable or disable keyframing, and by clicking on it once, you enable it. By clicking on it a second time, you're just going to nuke any keyframes for that attribute. So the only time you would want to click on that stopwatch a second time is if you're unhappy with the keyframes that you've currently set up and gone through who knows how long of intensive labor to get something to move or change over time, and you just might not like it, or you want to start over, whatever. That's when you click on it a second time. But in order for you to record more keyframes, all you have to do is change time and change your coordinate or your value, whatever it is that you're trying to keyframe. So if I want this thing over 10 seconds to move from left side of the screen to the right, I'm just going to use my little scrubber here. I'm going to drag it all the way to the end of time. Now, for me to get a second keyframe and record a new coordinate for position, I just have to change the value. I do not go to the stopwatch and click on it because that'll just get rid of the first keyframe I laid down and I'll have no movement whatsoever. I want movement. I want animation. So I'm going to leave that stopwatch activated. So I'm just going to change the coordinate now of my x value. I'm going to move it right over here. And I now see that at the end of my timeline at almost 10 seconds, I'm at 9 seconds and 29 frames because including frame 0, that equals 10 seconds. I now have my square on the right side of the screen, and I see this line. And this line is the path in which this square will be traveling to move from the right side of the screen, left to right. So now if I just grab my little playhead and drag it across time, I see that without me having any impact on, or I'm not grabbing that square up there. I'm just saying, let's see where this thing's at 2 seconds or 4 seconds or 6 or 8 or at the very end. And you can see that it is traveling from point A to point B. And that is because I have 2 keyframes. Keyframe 1, which recorded the value of the position coordinates at frame 0, and then keyframe number 2 at the very end of my timeline, which recorded the coordinate value, the x and y value of position at the end of my timeline. So over 10 seconds, this little box is just going to travel across the screen. Before I continue, I want to talk about how to actually see this happen while you work. What we need to do is to look at a preview. And After Effects has previews called RAM previews that you can use to basically process and analyze your work. A RAM preview is something where the computer will take every frame and stash it in your RAM, your memory, not your hard drive. If you still don't know the difference between hard drive and RAM, you should figure that out. Because if you're working with After Effects and I consider that advanced work, you should know the difference between memory and hard disk space. Totally different things. Okay, sorry. There's my rant for the day. Now, what a RAM preview is going to do is going to stash every frame in RAM and then basically assemble them together as a QuickTime movie, temporary QuickTime movie that you can watch to check out your work. And you can do this through composition, preview, RAM preview. You can also find it through a window called preview. I'm just going to use this one just because I don't want another window to deal with right now. And this works. So preview, RAM preview. Oh look, there's a keyboard shortcut, Control 0 for me on my laptop. If you have a full scale keyboard, then it's just 0 on the number pad, not the numbers that are on the top of your keyboard under your F keys. The number that's on the side deal, way on the right of your keyboard, for the number pad. So here I'm going to do a RAM preview. I'm going to say, all right, RAM preview this thing. And now it's going through, analyzing each frame. And I see this little green bar. And I saw that green bar sort of build itself and grow as this thing was able to process each frame and stash it in RAM. And then finally, every frame put together, once it's done, it'll go back and then replay your movie at real time. And this is really important to do because, oh, there's that yawn. Darn it. Sorry if I got you yawning. All right, anyways, a lot of people have worked with like Premiere or Final Cut, and they know that the space bar will play their movie for them. Even QuickTime, that's the deal. If you use the space bar in After Effects, it will play what's in your timeline, but you're not guaranteed real-time playback. And as an animator or compositor or motion graphic artist, real-time playback is critical. So get your hands off of that space bar as soon as you can. That's a bad habit. Use RAM preview. That either the 0 on your number pad or the Control 0 on a smaller keyboard, or going to composition, preview, RAM preview, or using the preview window. We'll talk about the preview window in more detail in a little bit. But here I am watching the movement of my square. So I have achieved animation. I've used 2 keyframes to move this square from the left side of the screen to the right. So, all right, there's the animation. Boom. That's great. I would like to start over. I want to get rid of my keyframes. I'm not happy with them. I want to animate a different property. That's when I come back to my stopwatch and say, all right, are you sure that you want to commit to nuking all those keyframes? And I'm going to say, yep, I do. So I'm going to click on the stopwatch, and those little diamonds in my timeline are now gone. Those recorded position coordinates in time are gone. I'm going to choose reset, put this thing back to the middle. Let's animate something else like scale. So scale, I'm going to say, all right, let's start the recording process. It's currently recording. The stopwatch is engaged. I have a keyframe plopped down in my timeline at frame 0 that is recorded 100% uniform scale. This is linked, and I have X and Y set at 100%. Now, if I were to move this to 2 seconds, close enough. That's 129. I'll go 2 seconds. 2 seconds. All right. Does it really matter? Yep, sure it does. So now what I could do is change the scale value. Don't touch the stopwatch. Just change the value. I'm going to change it down to 40%. And now I have a smaller square. And in the timeline, what I can see are 2 keyframes, each one having a different recorded value, 140. That means that the change in scale is going to occur between these 2 keyframes, which is in 2 seconds in time. And if I just drag my playhead over that 2 seconds, you can see that we have a scale change from 100% down to 40. So this scale change is happening in 2 seconds time. Now if I went to 4 seconds, I could change the scale again. I could go, since it's an After Effects file or the solid, I can go beyond 100%. So I'm going to go to 200. Now I said that, hey, from 2 seconds to 4, I like to go from 40% to 200%. So now I've got a multiple scale change event going. So I'm going to have 2 scale moves happening over the 4 seconds. I'm going to start at 100%, scale down to 40, and then scale back up to 200%. So you can add as many keyframes as you want in the timeline. In fact, good animation and motion graphics, you're going to be seeing all kinds of keyframes all over the place. So I could keep adding them at 2-second intervals, or I could come in and say let's land one right around 3 seconds that's going to change its scale again and just kind of get this thing kind of zooming in and out all over the place and look really, really professional. You just don't get any better than that right there. That is so lovely. Okay, so that's scale and multiple keyframes. Let's just nuke those, boop, and start over. Rotation, if I want this thing to rotate, I'm going to enable rotate keyframes, and maybe I'll start at 0 and over 5 seconds, somewhere around there. I want this thing to rotate 3 times. So that means 3 revolutions. So we talked about revolutions versus degrees. Here I'm going to go to revolutions and say I'd like you to rotate 3 times. So now what I have is a square that looks just like it did at frame 0. But if I were to scrub over time, you can see that this thing is rotating 3 full revolutions in 5 seconds. If I did a RAM preview of this, there's the first 5 seconds of this thing rotating, and then since there's no keyframing past 5 seconds, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to sit there, idle. Talk about professional. This belongs on TV. All right, I'm going to nuke those keyframes, reset my values, and then opacity, of course, is fading in and fading out. I have the ability to do that through a range of 0 to 100%, and it operates just the same. You'll set a keyframe for some value of opacity, and then over time change it somewhere else. So to recap, animation occurs with at least 2 keyframes of different values with time happening or occurring in between those keyframes. The keyframes can be, you can have as many as you want in your timeline, but you need at least 2. One keyframe will not change anything over time. All you're doing is just setting a value and then walking away from it. So it's when you start to have multiple keyframes and space of time between them where you end up being able to see things actually come to life. All right, we'll get into more advanced animation next.